At this time, one appellant, Evergreen Islands, has requested that all members of the council, except Councilmember Adams, recuse themselves from any further decisions on this matter. Mr. Glade's letter and request claims that the decision made by the council with respect to the appeal that claimed the project was not allowed in the R3 zone was arbitrary and capricious, and that the remaining members of the council are prejudiced against the project based on that decision. As a matter of law, the vote to deny the R3 zoning appeal does not disqualify any member from hearing the balance of the case. However, if any member of the council feels he or she is prejudiced against the project, as usual, under the appearance of fairness doctrine, he or she should so announce and step down. But the vote itself is not a per se violation of the doctrine. Should more than 3 members of the council step down, at least one will need to come back under the doctrine of necessity so that the council has a quorum and is able to reach a decision on the merits of the appeals and the recommendation from the Planning Commission. Additionally, Gerald Steele, an attorney now practicing in Olympia, on behalf of numerous citizens, claims that my advice to the Planning Commission that it was not to make a recommendation was, in his words, wrong, and that a significant procedural error has been made by not allowing a recommendation and not accepting the appeals. I think the record which I read to you earlier was very clear as to the scope of the remand from this council, and would note that the matter remanded consisted of 6 appeals already filed and the recommendation, all of which were at that time and still are under review by the council. In other words, what is before you tonight are the 6 appeals which were filed after the initial recommendation from the Planning Commission and that initial recommendation itself. The remand was part of that appellate process. It was not a rehearing on the merits, at least as I understood and the Planning Department understood Councilmember Geer's motion. At this time, the 6 appeals and the recommendation are before you with an expanded record. In my view, the matter should proceed as follows, subject, of course, to the mayor's chairing of the meeting and the council's preferences. First off, any appearance of fairness recusal should be announced and, if necessary, a quorum assured. Secondly, I believe Mr. Miesemer will make a short presentation with summarizing the project that's before you. Then the appeal should be decided with argument, but not testimony, argument only based on the record from the appellants and the applicant. I understand that the mayor will allot 10 minutes to each appellant to make a presentation, again, of argument based on the record, and the applicant will have an opportunity to respond once they are done. Once the council has made a decision on the appeals, the council should address the recommendation, which should either be accepted, rejected, or accepted with new, less, or revised conditions. It's up to the council. With respect to both the appeals and the recommendation, the Planning Commission members' statements about the matter made at the conclusion of the remand hearing may not be considered and are not part of the record. The appeals that were submitted after the remand hearing were not timely, and there was not a new recommendation to appeal. The contents of those appeals are not part of the record and also should not be considered. I would remind the council, the mayor, and all others in attendance that this is a quasi-judicial proceeding. This is a lot like a court of law. Outbursts from anyone with respect to points of order, applause, cheering, catcalls are not appropriate in a court of law, and they are not appropriate in this setting. Likewise, the responsibilities on the council members are similar to those on a judge. You are required to make a decision based on the application of the Anacortes Code as it applies to conditional use permits and the other environmental issues which may come up as they relate to the facts of this case. Any discussion of this case should involve the code and the facts that are in the record based on the hearings that were held before the Planning Commission. Once the council has indicated its intent on each of the appeals and on the substance of the recommendation, You will not take final action. Staff will present written findings and conclusions for you to consider at a later hearing. Can I answer any questions from the council or the mayor?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Patricia?
Brad, in the materials we received from the Planning Commission, those comments that were made are part of the materials I got. Now, is that or is that not a part of the record?
They are not part of the record. They were, I'm surprised they were sent to you, but if they were, they were. But you are to ignore those as best you can.
Well, this was a material that the city sent to me to review.
Well,
It's part of the transcript.
okay. If it was part of the transcript, it may be there. It is not part of the official record, should not influence your decision.
Okay, one more question.
And Nick, I guess it's like when you are in a courtroom, somebody may ask and answer a question, and the judge then may instruct the jury to disregard that, and that's essentially what I'm asking you to do at this time.
Well, to be honest with you, I thought all that comment and conversation were going to be stricken and we would never get a copy of it. Okay. Next question. In a letter from Libby dated September 29, 2011, and I want to be sure I got this right. Tonight it is anticipated that council will hear and make decisions on the remaining issues in the 6 appeals of the Planning Commission recommendation that were received. Also, the council could make a decision on the overall project application during the closed record meeting. Explain that to me. Does that mean that the whole project can be reviewed and decided tonight or
yes,
not?
That's the Planning Commission made a recommendation, and it's when you either accept, reject, or modify that recommendation, you will be taking action on the overall project.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council or the mayor?
Ms. Pickett?
Well, since I'm a little unclear on this, maybe others in the audience are as well. I thought a moment ago you said we'd deal with the 6 appeals, and then staff would put together, I mean, what we have, what I found in my packet anyway, was a set of old findings that weren't really applicable to the new plan and that sort of thing. So
you will first make decisions on the 6 appeals.
Right.
And then the next order of business would be to make a decision with respect to the recommendation that came from the Planning Commission. It's a different scenario to have something appealed that hasn't even been decided by you yet, but that's how the Anacortes Code is written. So that's the task that unfortunately is before you. It's a little odd.
And so the final set of findings and conditions then would be presented at another meeting.
Right. I would expect that the council would take a vote on each of the appeals, up or down, then would make a decision with respect to the recommendation, again with a vote, and then Mr. Larson's department will prepare written findings and conclusions that once adopted will be a final decision in this matter by the city.
Okay, council members, any other questions for Mr. Furlong?
Mr. Mayor, I raised this question with Mr. Furlong earlier. We live in a small community with an excellent community newspaper. Over the last couple months, that newspaper has run a number of editorials, articles, and letters to the editor which reference this case. It's virtually impossible for any of us to open that newspaper without at least seeing the headlines. And sometimes reading part of an article before you realize, uh-oh, this is about something I shouldn't be reading, and then stop reading that article. So I wish to disclose, and others may wish to also disclose, that we may have seen bits and pieces of such publicly circulated newspaper information. In my personal opinion, I tried hard not to read it as soon as I figured out that's what it was referencing, and I do not feel that in doing so I have prejudiced my opinion one way or the other, I feel I have enough information here that this is what I will base my decision on, and I do not feel that I have an appearance of fairness issue, but I wish to disclose it for the record.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Adams?
as far as procedure, we're going to listen to the 6 appeals first, and then we will listen to all 6 of them before we decide on appeals, or are we going to consider them one at a time?
It's up to you.
It's up to us. I'd rather listen to all of them before we make any decisions.
I agree.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Gear?
as far as procedure goes, I have a question about one of the exhibits. Would that be appropriate to ask that question before we hear the appeals? From one of the appellants?
Is it a question about what's in it and not understanding what's said,
A
or?
point of clarification based on the appeal, which is Exhibit 38.
It might be best to ask the appellant if it's something from them during their appeal presentation.
During their presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
Again, we'll hear from our building department, background, history on the proposal.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say I agree with Cynthia and Eric on their positions that the Memory Care Center itself is a good project. Some people don't like where it's located, but me personally, and a city council member, when I first saw the location and the site plan, and I saw the location of it, I said, well, this is a good place for this, not considering potential traffic problems at that time or anything, the impact or the perceived impact at the time. But for me, it was private. I could see the creek being better protected because, as Erica pointed out, when you're dealing with one individual that can be fined rather than 6 or 7, it's really difficult to control residential use of pesticides and so forth, though most people do respect that. But I saw now with a 60-foot buffer, I think it's a good fit because they have a low impact on the views up the hill. They're going to have trees around it. It's going to be a nice private place. The safety is the only issue left that I perceive as an issue, okay? I mean, the main issue, there may be other small issues. The main issue is the safety issue of the pedestrians. There are many streets in all urban centers that aren't perfect for the traffic, but considering that it doesn't increase the traffic, in my opinion, and by the experts, I don't think that's going to be the big issue, though I'm willing to talk about what we can do to make it safer. And so I just want to put that out there to the council that I am ready to do that.
Based on what I've heard, the risks of the impacts are greater than what our codes and manuals cover, in my opinion, just going over everything. So I don't think our codes and ordinances go far enough. They're so general in some places that they can be interpreted in different ways. Where I was going after risk of impact, and I've said this since the beginning about the traffic study being from a technical manual, not necessarily being in the neighborhood and seeing what the local impacts are. My recommendations were going to be for conditioning almost to what you said, half-street improvements. Basically 32nd Street, half-street improvements from the development to 32nd Street and half-street improvements on 34th Street to M Avenue. I think the impacts, and we need to figure out, well, we feel that the conditions are going to lessen the impact. The food trucks, is it FSA or whatever the food truck is, those, even if it's just twice a week, I still don't think those streets were built to the standard of commercial traffic. There was no vision there, and that's what we have to kind of figure out the impact of that neighborhood is. The original vision of that neighborhood were narrow streets, light traffic, kids, families, that kind of thing in an R3 zone. I agree with Eric in that we should condition some portion or all of the area next to the facility for sidewalks and curbs. I just don't know to what extent, if half-street improvements to a certain distance rather than full street improvements, if we're talking about the nexus and what's realistic and what's overstepping our bounds as a government body.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Pickett?
One of the, we also have in the record testimony that the people along 34th Street like they're sort of farming the right-of-way there. And they like that. They like the flowers and the vegetables and whatnot that they've got going along the right-of-way. So there is going to be kind of a push me, pull you here in the neighborhood. I wonder if we could write the conditions so that staff and the proponent work with the neighbors to devise some kind of pathway for the school kids that isn't too disruptive.